Are you someone who has focused most on the workout? Like when you think about your health and wellness, when you think about taking care of yourself, when you think about living a healthy lifestyle, have you been someone who's been able to move and work out most? I asked that question because that was me for most of my life. I grew up an athlete. I was active forever. I started swimming when I was 6, 7 years old, was a swimmer my entire life up until college, played soccer for most of that time too. And I also played lacrosse for a couple of years in my high school career. And then once I got to college, I stopped sports because at that point, honestly, I was over it. I was done. I was burned out. I had done enough, in my opinion. And for all of that time growing up, I learned about moving my body. I learned about going to a practice. I learned about being a part of a team. I learned about physical movement. But true story, or the truth is, I did not learn about all of the other components related to what does it mean to be a healthy, active individual? What does it mean to actually live a healthy, active lifestyle? Like I really didn't learn anything beyond that. And so today's episode is about talking about the 23 hours beyond the hour workout, beyond going to the gym, beyond pressing play, whatever it is. Because the other 23 hours is how our health is actually built into something sustainable. And this is something that so many of us were not taught, or we were conditioned to believe that as long as we're moving our body, we're getting some sort of workout in, we're sweating in some capacity, that was enough. And I'm here to tell you, especially as we get into this midlife health season, it's not enough. And what's interesting is what used to work for us workout wise at some point doesn't work for us at all anymore when we get to midlife either. And so it really becomes this double-edged sword of, I thought I knew what I needed to do, especially from a workout standpoint, which starts to become not true in some capacity. It starts to become misaligned. And then the other side of the coin is I also didn't really learn exactly what I need to be doing the other 23 hours a day that actually make a big difference. So now I'm really caught. And that's why I want to talk about this, because I know for me, this was something that was incredibly eye-opening for me to learn. And I'm still learning it every single day. Some days I crush it. Some days I really don't. Some days I really focus on what can I really manage based on our lifestyle, based on our kids, based on my business, based on what we actually have going on. And every day does look a little bit different. But I've learned that I've had to actually figure out what are the things I can do to focus far beyond just the movement component. And so if you are someone who can relate to this, I want to really make sure we're talking about this in a very significant way today, because there are so many of us that think as long as I'm working out, that's all I need. And maybe you were conditioned to believe that too. I was conditioned to believe that for a really long time. I've said this in other podcast episodes, but just to kind of share it again, as an athlete, I really started to believe, or conditioned myself to believe, that as long as I was going to practice, burning the calories, doing the workouts, lifting the weights when I needed to, swimming the laps, running the things, that I could just eat whatever I wanted. I didn't have to worry about sleep. I didn't have to worry about nutrient density or getting enough vegetables or getting enough variety of micronutrients, right? I literally didn't even think that it mattered, because as long as I was moving my body, that was healthy. And over time, especially as I grew further into motherhood and now into my mid 30s, late 30s, early 40s, it is just wild how much I did not really learn about the other 23 hours of the day. And so that's what I really want to talk about, because I think, again, it's so easy to think about the workout component being all that we really need. And in midlife, but really at any age and stage, like we have to understand the holistic picture. We have to be looking at everything. So let's talk about a couple different takeaways inside of this concept of the 23 hours of the day. So let's say you dedicate 30, 45, 60 minutes to some sort of workout, some sort of movement, whether that's, walking, whether that's going to a class, whether that's going to yoga, whether that's weightlifting, going to the gym, maybe you're doing something with a friend, whatever it is, you have that dedicated time. We're able to actually create movement into your day and have that be a part of your lifestyle. And so what often happens is we start to believe, okay, I did this thing, I checked this off, I'm active, I'm healthy, that's all that it really takes. And don't get me wrong, obviously movement is a huge pillar inside of foundational health, and it matters when we're thinking about our wellness holistically. But the reality is we have to also unpack movement from the standpoint of what are we doing the rest of the day? Because our body, our brain, our momentum, our body composition change, whatever it is that we're trying to accomplish goal-wise is an accumulation of what we do all day long, not just a workout. So let's talk about what that is. One of the key things is NEAT. NEAT is non-exercise activity thermogenesis. That's essentially like, what is the body burning and utilizing in your day-to-day things that you subconsciously aren't even aware of yourself doing, right? So everything your body needs to essentially like wake up for the day and do subconscious movements, everything that your body accumulates over time from walking and breathing and all of the different components to how your body functions. Like there's so much inside of how your body utilizes energy. And we have to think about, okay, even beyond just working out for 30, 45, 60 minutes, whatever it is, what does our overall NEAT look like throughout the day? Are we getting up and taking breaks? Are we making a conscious effort to make sure we're moving in some capacity throughout the whole day? That is huge, 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 huge. Things like taking the stairs, walking, cleaning the house, playing with the kids, standing, gardening, eating, carrying groceries, all of the errands that you're running, all of that, all of it accumulates into essentially what your body is using activity-wise throughout the entire day. And so for a lot of people, especially when we think about busy working lifestyle, working out of the home or even in the home, which can sometimes be even harder, sitting at a desk job, we think, okay, we've moved today for my workout, but then you end up sitting for 10, 12 hours of the day because of the job or because of whatever your circumstances. So it's thinking about the larger picture of how it's not ever just exercise. It's not ever just the workout. It's got to be, what am I also doing movement-wise throughout the rest of the 23 hours of the day, right? Now, obviously, some of that is accumulated sleep and getting adequate recovery and sleep time. But beyond that, it's got to be always evaluating, what am I doing to accumulate more movement throughout the day? Because when you do that, there are so many incredible benefits, things like blood sugar regulation. It helps overall circulation. It helps digestion. It helps mobility. It helps cardiovascular health, overall body composition change. One of the most secret weapons that are incredibly important to think about when you're thinking about, I want to go after body composition change, or I really want to target fat loss. It's moving throughout the day, not just in a workout. It's moving throughout the day, taking breaks, getting good walks in, getting that low impact, steady state cardio in, more or less, right? Not balls to the wall cardio, not HIIT cardio. There's a time and a place for that in very dedicated ways. But that low impact throughout the day consistently, that is the stuff that makes a massive difference for how the body feels. So really, it's got to be about like, okay, how do I build more movement into my day beyond just the hour workout? So that's why we think about the 23 hours, because so much of it can be unraveled very quickly when we think about health, if we're not thinking about what are we doing the rest of the day, right? Now let's go to takeaway number 2. This is really about how the body can adapt and how the body can recover. And at the end of the day, the body can only adapt to what it can recover from. So we think like, okay, we just need to do more. We just need to try harder, and that will equal more results. That will heed better things. And that's not it, right? We think like, again, we have to do all of these additional components to actually get to results. But the key is we actually have to give the body very dedicated rest, right? We have to actually give the body a way to adapt to the stress by giving it adequate rest in order to respond. Right? So things like a workout, they're obviously a stressor on the body. Strength training is a huge stressor on the body. Anything that's really intense cardio, vascular exercise is obviously intense on the body. All of those things are huge as far as health benefits go, and they make a big difference in how we can feel throughout our life. The key is giving our bodies the space and the time to make sure that we are basically working hard, playing hard, but also resting hard, right? Recovering hard. When we allow the body time to recover, this is when we repair muscle tissue. When we repair muscle tissue, that allows us to come back stronger, our muscles to grow bigger, our muscles to be essentially more toned, right? That is what it requires. Adequate rest alongside working muscles really, really intentionally for whatever it is you're working towards, right? Regulating inflammation, restoring your nervous system, adapting and becoming stronger like we talked about. All of these things happen during recovery and rest. And so the adaptation that our body can go through happens after we do the workout or leave the gym during the other 23 hours. However, we have to actually create the environment so we can give the body the space to recover. So a lot of this comes down to sleep. A lot of this comes down to nutrition. A lot of this comes down to how are we managing stress? It has to be this all-encompassing picture of deciding how am I actually letting my body recover? It has to go back to your habits. So again, if you're someone who's overly focused on I can hit my workout, no problem. That is brainless to me. That is easy to me. That is the thing that I can check off the list. But then the other 23 hours a day, you're under eating. You're not eating enough fiber. You're scrolling into the night before you go to bed. You're not managing your stress well. You're overcommitting to things. You have no boundaries. You're not implementing rest days between your workouts enough. You accumulate all of these little things throughout the day, and it doesn't give your body the opportunity or the right environment to actually recover well. So this is another key thing to think about in the other 23 hours of the day, because there is so much we need to choose and proactively decide on in order to make sure we're actually helping the body get the benefits of what it is we're putting in during a 30, 45, 60-minute workout, right? So that's really the key takeaway number 2 is how are we also allowing the body to adapt to what we're doing in a workout period by giving it the environment and the recovery capacity that it needs. We'll get back to our conversation shortly after this message. If you are an overwhelmed and completely confused mom who just wants a simplified, easy to follow, and understandable plan when it comes to their health and wellness journey, then you're in the right place. As a wellness coach, I focus most on empowering women to follow a highly personalized and bio-individual plan that actually gets you results and that feels sustainable for your longevity. I'd love to invite you to set up a free coaching call to talk about your health and wellness journey. Head to erinshreer.com/coaching to set up your call today. Again, that URL is erinshreer.com/coaching to set up your call. And to make it even easier, head to the show notes of this podcast and click free coaching session to set up your call ASAP. Now let's dive back into the conversation. The third is the body as an ecosystem, or your health is an ecosystem. So we can't ever be compartmentalizing. I literally talk about this all the time. I feel like I'm a broken record when I talk about this, but I want this to be the main thing that we all understand over and over and over. And one of the biggest takeaways, because we can't separate anything from hormones to gut health, to mental health, blood sugar regulation, sleep, stress, exercise, nutrition, our metabolic health, our environment, our relationships, spiritual wellness, all of these things. Like I talk about over and over, it is a massive ecosystem all working together. And so your body never operates and doesn't operate in any kind of separate department. It's all one interconnected system. So things like sleep impact hunger. Stress impacts your digestion. Digestion impacts overall nutrient absorption and how well you're actually absorbing anything that you're consuming. Nutrition impacts training recovery. Like we just talked about, if you're hitting it hard in the gym or in a workout, but then your nutrition is terrible the other 23 hours of the day, paired with stress, paired with terrible sleep, like your body isn't able to recover. Your muscle mass impacts glucose disposal. So the more muscle you have on the body, the better your body is able to regulate blood sugar. The better your body is able to maintain energy. The better your body is able to slowly move towards more body composition change. That toned look that so many people talk about that they want and need or are working towards in their health journey, that comes from what are you doing nutritionally? And then what kind of strategy are you pairing with that strategically when it comes to workouts and the gym? They don't work separately. It all works together. So remembering that, right? So this is where the other 23 hours becomes bigger than nutrition and exercise. This is about your entire environment. This is about all of your habits. This is about all of the routines you have or you don't have. This is what you're telling yourself day in and day out. This is how you're showing up in your relationships. This is how you feel mentally and emotionally. It is all of it. So again, if you think about, okay, I'm doing the workout, I'm hitting the thing for about an hour a day. But then again, the other 23 hours are filled with nothing but rushing and stressing and sitting and scrolling and restricting and caffeinating to keep up, or pushing harder, sleeping less, and just repeating the cycle over and over. You're literally just creating a Groundhog's Day situation where you're never able to move to the next step of getting to your goals because you're just more or less undoing any kind of work or effort you've put in when you think about the workout component. And this for me was the biggest wake-up call because I, for a very long time, was able to manage, so to speak, just doing my workout and then having shit habits the rest of the day. Like I said, barely sleeping, on my phone all the time, no real boundaries, eating like crap, like just not paying attention, not learning how to pay attention, not understanding how much that was making a difference. And so every day I would just kind of repeat the same cycle, and I would be so frustrated about staying in the exact same spot. The definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results. That's not how health works. If you want drastic transformation, if you want to change your body composition, if you want to move into another layer of health that you have never gone into before, you are going to have to hold up the mirror, get honest with yourself, and decide what is it that you're going to let go of, what is it that you're going to change, and what is it that you're going to really focus on the other 23 hours of the day beyond just moving your body that's actually going to help you start to move the needle. I think a lot of people think this has to be perfect. This has to be this perfectly calculated situation every single day. And I am the first one to tell you that's not reality. That's not reality. What matters more is your repeated daily patterns. Not being perfect, understanding that every day is going to have some level of unpredictability, understanding that it's not going to go to plan, understanding that there are things that are going to feel really hard and uncomfortable, and instead choosing to say, okay, what are the repeated daily patterns I'm going to focus on? It doesn't have to be some perfect situation, but it does have to be intentional. I want to remind you that this concept is really important to embrace. It's essentially this idea of like the 23-hour audit. So like I said, maybe you're like me and you learned over time, like as long as I'm working out, I'm good. Or you believe that as long as you're moving your body, that's all you need. I've had to pivot out of that mindset very quickly because again, I just had my like mind blown over and over as I got older because it just wasn't working anymore. So if you are someone again who feels like, I'm hitting the workouts, why am I not making progress? Here's your reminder to do your 23-hour audit. Asking yourself things like, how much am I moving throughout the entire day beyond my workout? How much am I sitting? Do I need to take more breaks? Can I take more walks? What does my nutrition look like? Am I eating enough protein? Am I eating fiber? Am I getting a lot of quality vegetables and fruits? Am I hydrating enough? So many people are so drastically underhydrated. And that's a huge driver inside of cellular health, energy, how well you absorb your nutrients. It's huge for overall hormonal health, et cetera. Like hydration, water, electrolytes, that matters too. And then thinking about, are you fueling for your workouts, after your workouts? If you're not doing that, why? So many women I've spoken to or that I coach come in and they aren't eating before a workout. That's literally like trying to rev the gas on the car as fast as possible with no gas in it. That is literally what trying to do a workout with no fuel does. And especially if you're in the place where you want to build muscle, you want to be stronger, you want to be toned, where do you think muscle gets the ability to build from? It comes from the inputs and the fuel it's given. So we have to be fueling well with intention. One of my mentors says, ideally, you have 2 to 3 meals in you with high density, like nutrients, calories, et cetera, inside your body before you go and train. So you have an incredible amount of energy to take into the workout. Now, I know that's not realistic for everybody, and you have to figure out what works best for your schedule. But at the very least, training fasted is not the way. If you really want to continue to build into strength and beyond that, give your body the environment it needs to recover. So with recovery, questions like, am I sleeping enough? Am I giving myself rest days? Do I constantly feel exhausted? Are my workouts actually helping me feel energized, or do I feel more depleted from them? If you feel more depleted, something has to change. You are overdoing it for no reason. And again, over focusing on the movement workout bucket versus the other 23 hours of the day. Another big one is the stress component. Like, are you constantly stressed? Are you constantly living in a state of urgency and emergency? Do you have boundaries in place? Have you been able to unplug? Are you spending time outside? Like, what does that actually look like in evaluating those things? And then connection and purpose is big. Am I connecting with the people I love? Am I laughing? Am I having fun? Like, am I finding the joy in all of this? Or am I literally just grinding every day and not pausing enough to see the joy, to build community, to have friendships, to be with my husband, my spouse, to spend time with my kids, to spend time with myself, like all of these things. It all matters. It's huge when we think about, again, this concept of the other 23 hours. And, I have learned enough now that I really feel when I'm not paying enough attention to this. Like, I get into seasons, and transparently, I'm in one right now where I overly focus on certain things. Like I overly focus on making sure I do my workouts because I always have, because that's been the easy thing for me. I over focus on making sure that I'm taking care of work things. I over focus on my kids, and things like spending time with my husband goes to the wayside. Eating well goes to the wayside. Like just things that I know I need to do in order to help myself feel good holistically start to go to the wayside. And so it really has to constantly be this audit and evaluation of like, am I filling all of the different buckets? And this is a concept that I've taught in my wellness program with my clients in the past, which is essentially this idea of the wellness bucket blueprint, and thinking about buckets being my nutritional health, my physical health, my relational health, my emotional health, mental health, spiritual health, nutritional health, and environment, all of those different buckets. And when one is not full or you're neglecting one, like if you build enough self-awareness, you can start to feel it and you can start to understand, okay, I'm focusing really far over here on the wellness puzzle, but not so much over here. And now I feel super out of balance and it doesn't feel good. So this is really just an episode to remind you about how if you're someone who loves the workout, if you're someone who can move your body easily, if you're someone who loves to sweat, who loves to go to a class, who loves to just be moving your body, I love that, right? Make sure you're always prioritizing that in some capacity, because it is a necessity for your health, especially as you grow older and especially as we think about longevity, and especially for us as women. When I think about movement for women specifically, please don't forget the importance of having a broad variety of exercise as a part of what you're doing. Most importantly, strength training. Strength training is literally how you build the armor for your life. Having resistance against your bones, having an opportunity to build muscle and retain the muscle that you have, building strength so your body can have not only the energy, but also like the sustainability that it needs to keep up with whatever it is in your life. Strength training and resistance is number one. It has to be a part of your regimen. And then beyond that, obviously things that bring you joy, mobility, stretch work, some level of cardio, like all of that is huge. And having some level of variety is big time. But beyond the workout, beyond the movement, we have to always be assessing the other 23 hours. Because health is not just built in movement. It's not just built in the gym. It's not just built at a class. It's not just built by what we do in 60 minutes a day. It's built by what we do repeatedly day after day after day for the entire day, the full 24 hours. So I'm hoping that this maybe gives you a little bit of a reminder around, what do you really need to do as you evaluate your health right now? Is it really overly focusing on the workout component, or do you have that dialed in? And then asking yourself like, okay, if I don't need another workout, what do I need in the other 23 hours that would make my body and my brain feel better? Maybe it's things like going to bed a little bit earlier, eating enough protein at breakfast, taking a walk after dinner, taking a rest day, getting outside more, taking breaks throughout your work week, whatever it is. Figure out a way to make sure you're not overly focused on one pillar of wellness, and instead focusing on the full 23 hours beyond just the movement piece, because it's so imperative to make sure you're evaluating all of the different components as you work towards living a healthy, fulfilling life the way you deserve. Thank you so much for tuning in to today's episode. I know balancing time and energy can be a challenge, and I'm so proud of you for listening in and investing in your wellness journey. I feel incredibly grateful to connect with you and for the opportunity to share more knowledge, stories, and encouragement related to all things wellness. I would love to hear how this podcast has served you. If you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe and leave a review on either iTunes or Spotify. Your support truly means the world to me and helps me reach more women just like you and me who are looking to transform their health from the inside out. Plus, when you share this episode with a friend, we invite more women in to learn alongside us. What a gift. Remember, knowledge is power, and the more we know, the better we can do. For ourselves, for our families, and our future. Well done on taking the step towards a healthier, happier you. Until next week, stay empowered and stay well.